Hi there, it's Phil Naylor here. I'm a psychotherapist and continuing this series of talks. One of the things that I kind of mentioned I'm a psychotherapist, but I don't kind of bring in all of the rest of my background necessarily into things. I may have outlined that on my YouTube channel, but uh, part of my training, or most of my training actually, is in psychology. In both my undergraduate and graduate degrees were in psychology, my graduate degree in applied social psychology. So a lot of some of the principles that I'm sharing with you aren't necessarily part of a psychotherapist training, which are helping people kind of overcome their problems and things like that. So there's all various schools and methods and things that are focused on in the training of a psychotherapist versus kind of a broader academic kind of focus of somebody who's trained in psychology. Although there's a lot of overlap between all that, but anyway, I'm kind of drawing on some of my knowledge of social psychology in trying to educate people, give people a framework for understanding ourselves and our world and how all these things kind of work together, to give people an understanding about how we work. Because I don't think that's something that's given to people. We're not educated in that in our schools, or even if you go to a psychotherapist, go in for psychotherapy, you're not kind of given a good framework about, well, what's going on here? What's the thing that's wrong with you? How are we going about working with this thing? So my goal is to kind of give you people a kind of a basic or simple framework to understand, because a lot of the things that we need to uh, that need to be available for us to understand how we work don't have to be vast and complex. In one way, we are vast and complex beings, and if you look at the whole literature of psychology and psychotherapy, it's vast and complex. But a lot of it breaks down to simple principles, and a lot of it is just spin-offs of those simple principles. And so I'm kind of at our last at the last video, we talked a little bit about a summary about where I've been going and the various aspects that I've been talking about and leading up to where we're at. I kind of we kind of been finishing off around how we've been socially shaped and developed and the elements that go into that. I started giving some examples about social media and how that shapes us, but I wanted to finish off kind of this section before I expand out into other things about outlining some sort of other basic principles that need to be aware of in terms of particularly social conditioning and our conditioning in general. so anyway, I'm going to do a couple of short videos on this, and I just want people to have this as a background kind of reference thing. Okay. So we are often shaped by what we do through some form of reward and punishment framework, so we talked about the fight flight mechanism. In a lot of ways that shapes us through something that we're afraid of. We have a defense mechanism that gets kicked in when we are sensing danger. But when we feel anxiety or fear, it's not a pleasant feeling, right? We want to get away from that thing, and as I talked about, not all of our dangers that are perceived dangers or threats are things that are like physical threats to ourselves. It expands into all kinds of other things. So we'll avoid things that we perceive as threatening and are going to cause us harm in some way. And when we have a harm alarm, right, it gives us some sort of internal shot of adrenaline or something like that. So we get a negative, kind of like it's an alarm, can also be used as a punishment or something like that. So something to say, avoid that thing. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about conditioning and what that's all about, and giving you a broad definition of people mostly know about how we get conditioned into something. People kind of have a sense of what that is, but from a psychological point of view and how that's been studied, that breaks down into two forms of conditioning. One is called classical conditioning, and the other is called operant conditioning. Okay. classical conditioning is about how two things become associated together and then can elicit a response. So a lot of our unconscious conditioning comes through classical conditioning, and the classical classical experiment to demonstrate classical conditioning is the one known as Pavlov's dog. And so this was an experiment that this guy Pavlov did, where he would have a dog, and he noticed that when he bought the dog food, the dog would drool. And so this drooling response was in response to the stimulus, which was the food. So automatically it starts to salivate in order to get ready to eat and digest its food. Okay. But Pavlov noticed that if he introduced another stimulus along with that thing, in this case, it was like a bell. He'd ring a little bell when he fed the dog, and the dog would drool. Okay. And so didn't look like anything different was happening, but what he was able to do is that all he had to do is ring the bell, and there would be no food, and the dog would drool. Okay, so the dog wasn't really thinking consciously, oh, food is coming, but its system did, right? Its system says, oh, bell and food go together. It's like the same thing. So I'm going to have that response. The bell is a signal to the food. And so we get, in a lot of our conditioning, our responses to things kind of happen like that. Are there good things that are going on in a certain situation that always happen? And then that thing can be conditioned to that response. So if you have a negative experience with somebody who's grumpy all the time, every time you're there, anytime you see that person, you kind of get a bad feeling. Or if you're in a particular place when a negative thing happened, there's a particular room, you're at a workplace, and if you're working on this in this particular work area, and it's stressful, and you're working with some colleague you don't know or you don't like or something, anytime you could just go to that workspace and have a bad feeling, even though the work colleague's not there. On a positive note, there could be you could have associations with music, so you're having a good time at a party and you have that particular song that comes up, or you're having a particular good time at away camping or something, and some song came up, and now every time that song comes up, it just reminds you, you have this good feeling because it reminds you of that good time that you had. So we get kind of conditioned. It's not something we would, and you have to think about a little bit, like, why do I feel good every time I have that song, and then you say, oh, well, it kind of reminds me of that camping trip I was on, or that good time I had or something. And so you start to realize, oh, there is a connection, but oftentimes we're unaware. It's a kind of an unconscious connection. So you may think of things, you can think of in your own life, the things that have been conditioned just by association, a good thing that was happening, and you have good memories about being in a particular place, or at grandma's house or something when everybody was there. And so if you just drive by grandma's house, you have a good feeling, so that's kind of a example of classical conditioning. Operant conditioning is a little bit different, and it involves being rewarded from an act that you do, something that you do that results in some sort of positive, could be negative association too, can work either way. So this was come about why this is how training happens with a lot of animals. As when I was in psychology, we all had to do rat training. So we had to demonstrate the operant conditioning by getting a rat to kind of learn how to operate a lever in order to get its food pellets out. And you had to kind of train it to first by kind of classical conditioning, because you'd have to, every time the rat came near the dispenser, you'd press a button and a pellet would come out, and it'd go, oh, there's a pellet, and it'd eat that, right? So then the more you did that, the more it started to hang around that area. And then you'd reward it for doing something, putting its paw on this lever. So if just put the paw, so it'd be just accidentally just sniffing around, puts its paw there, and you'd have to watch it, and you give it that reward of the pellet. And so pretty soon it starts to learn, oh, if I put my paw on the lever, then I'll get a pellet. Then finds out, no, now you have to push down the pellet. push down the lever to get the pellet. And so it gradually learns, first of all, through association. Oh, there's food over here. And if I go over to this place, food will come. And it doesn't happen at the other side of the cage, it happens on this side of the cage. Pretty soon it learns that, oh, if I press this lever, I'm going to get pellets. And so then you start to learn it gets a pellet every time. And then you can train it to, no, it will get a pellet it has to, push it a number of times, make 3 times before a pellet comes. So it learns every third thing it gets one, or every 5 one, or you can make it do up to 10. And so it learns that, oh, when I do this thing, I get this reward. And so that's how it's conditioned to do certain things. And if you think about how dogs are trained, you have a little reward, you have, hey, come here, and here, good boy, give it that reward. And so a lot of our other kinds of conditioning happens through these a reward as a result of an effort. And so, and what makes it most rewarding is not when the rat gets a pellet every single time it presses the thing, once it's full, it's not interested in doing that anymore. So if you want the behavior to stick, you don't reward it every single time. You have to reward it at certain times, and you want to reward it even more. What is even more conditioning is if it's rewarded on an unpredictable intermittent schedule. So not like every third time it presses the lever does it get the thing. It could come at random times. Sometimes it'll come after 1 or 2 presses. Other time it'll take like 20 presses for it to come. And so this way you get a rat to work really hard. It's going to press these things all these times to just get one silly little pellet. And that's how we treat even dolphins and things like that. They give them a fish or something, but you don't give it a fish every time. You don't give the dog a reward every time. You give it once in a while, and once in a while you can get a jackpot. You get a whole pile of fish or a whole big reward. It's like, oh, wow, juicy. And this is exactly what happens in gambling, and especially in casinos. If you can imagine that, how does that work? Well, you keep putting coins in, keep pushing the lever, and you're waiting for a jackpot. And what's going to keep people hooked is if they go to a casino all the time and they spend an hour pulling the lever and they're not getting anything, well, what's in it for me? I'm not doing that. But if you get somebody and they get a jackpot, so I got to do more of that, right? I did, especially if they got a jackpot after just a few tries. Like, holy cow, money, I'm going to get that. So I'm going to do this a whole bunch more times, and then the next time it's going to take a lot longer before they get a jackpot, and then they might get little jackpots or big jackpots. And so that's what gets people hooked. And so it doesn't matter. They can go a whole evening and not get anything at the casino, but they'll keep coming back. They'll keep coming back. And as long as they get a reward once in a while, they're going to keep coming back. It's going to keep, reinforcing that behavior. And this is another thing that you might want to think about in terms of how does that operate in your life, in our lives? How does that working for a reward and getting the jackpot, how does that shape our behavior? So I'll leave it like that for now, and we're going to elaborate on this principle and some other principles, one being social reward and the motivation of social approval and disapproval, and also how the actual rewards work within our system. So there's actually an internal reaction that is rewarding or unrewarding. So we'll go a little bit more into that before we kind of move on to other topic areas. I want to give you a nice foundation in this right now. So I'll leave it like that, and I'll see you at our next talk. Thank you.